Hello, everyone. I'm Cyndi Edwards. Algernon Pharmaceuticals has been generating a lot of news lately because the company has a number of promising clinical trials underway. The latest involves using the repurposed drug Ifenprodil to treat small cell lung cancer. Algernon's CEO, Christopher Moreau, joins us now to tell us more. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Cyndi. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you very much. So you filed this pre-investigational new drug meeting request with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration detailing the plan to use Ifenprodil for the treatment of small cell lung cancer. So why is this looking like a promising treatment?
Well, this is a fairly challenging cancer to treat. And specifically, we're dealing with patients, or we want to deal with patients who have what's known as chemo refractory cancer. They failed their first round or second round of chemo. And it's a pretty harsh diagnosis. Prognosis is very challenging. And an investigator, a scientist from Dartmouth College in the US, really dedicated the latter years of his career to looking at certain receptors on cancer cells, and specifically the NMDA receptor, which is the receptor that Ifenprodil binds with. And he found in his animal research that cancers like pancreatic cancer, small cell lung cancer express the NMDA receptor, and that Ifenprodil binding with that receptor in his research studies and in small cell lung cancer in combination with a chemotherapy drug called topotecan actually had an impressive effect on slowing down and in cases stopping the growth of the tumor. So this is a very, we're obviously as a company very interested in Ifenprodil. We think it's a very interesting molecule. We've investigated it for COVID. We're looking at it for IPF and cough. And cancer is a new dimension of Ifenprodil's potential. And so that's what the news was about in terms of us going to the FDA.
And is this asking the FDA to start human trials in the U.S. with these two drugs together? Is that what essentially this is about?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So pre-IND just means IND is Investigational New Drug. This is a process that the FDA provides where companies like Algernon can send their clinical plan to the FDA, and the FDA can look at it. What we're really thinking about a phase 1 for this, because we want to get the dose right.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dr. North used a different delivery method, not an oral dose of the drug, peritoneal, so delivered it into the rat model. And what we're wanting to do, and so this is why we're thinking more in line of a phase 1, is we want to get that dose right. And what is the equivalent dose from the preclinical studies into the human studies? The interesting thing about a cancer phase 1 study is that you can see some efficacy. So it's not just safety and dose, because in a cancer study, you can't enroll healthy patients. They have to have the cancer that you're investigating. So even in a phase 1, a small phase 1 study, you might still see an efficacy signal. So that's we're hopeful that we'll get the feedback from the FDA that we're hoping, and that we can move it quite quickly along.
I'm also curious, does the FDA usually respond in a timely manner, or does this usually take a while?
Actually, all of these timelines are documented. So when you file a pre-IND request, by law, they need to respond within 30 days.
Good.
And so when you file that request, they come back to you to submit all your documentation. And then pre-COVID, sometimes it was a meeting, could be in person, typically could be on the phone or Zoom call, or it just could be a written response, and then you can have a meeting if requested. So there's different ways.
So things could move fairly quickly here. Now, as you also asked the FDA if you could move a study for chronic cough trials here in the U.S. as well, correct? Because of something that has come out of Australia that's looking promising.
Right. We are running a chronic cough and IPF trial in Australia. It's a 20-patient open label study. And investors need to keep in mind that when we launch that study, we weren't producing Ifenprodil. So we were accessing Ifenprodil from a Japanese supplier, and the drug had never been introduced into the US. So we knew that the FDA would have some questions about Ifenprodil, questions that we would only be able to answer if we manufactured the drug ourselves and if we formulated it and did a lot of tox work. And so we didn't have to do that work in Australia. So when we went to Australia, they looked at the documentation from Japan and the history of the drug, and they said, we're comfortable with you running your IPF and chronic cough trial here. Some challenges are it's a smaller market. These are very sick people. And so the enrollment velocity can be slow. And then COVID stepped in. Now we announced 14 patients enrolled. We have 8 patients who have subscribed to be a part of the study, but we can't get them to be screened because of the lockdown situation in parts of Australia and New Zealand. So COVID has had a major impact on not only our study, but others. So sorry, to get to your question, we did have some interim cough data, and we're comparing patients' cough with their own baseline because this is an open label study. There is no placebo. So when patients enroll in the study, we put a halter on them for 24 hours. We have their 24-hour and waking cough count. Then we measure their cough in 30 days and in 3 months. And there was positive trending data. And cough associated with IPF is a very challenging condition to treat.
We should mention IPF, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So it's an unknown pulmonary fibrosis.
Yeah, that's what idiopathic means. Right. So chronic cough is a set condition of IPF as well. You can have, it's a subset, chronic cough. And so in looking at the interim data was positive trending, we said, you know what, let's now go to the FDA with the data, with our COVID data on Ifenprodil in terms of the safety. And let's see if the FDA will allow us to move it into a phase 2 study for just cough. Now, we announced plans to file our pre-IND. We haven't filed it yet. We'll come back to the market when it's filed, but it will be very shortly.
And really quickly, how do you even define chronic cough? Is that just somebody who coughs all day and they have no idea why?
I think it's typically 8 weeks, a cough that just won't abate after 8 weeks and without sort of any known origin. And there's really there are a couple of companies in the space, Merck, Bellis Health, and but mostly it's over-the-counter medicines, cough syrups, cough drops. It really is, for all of us have had a cough at some point in our lives.
Sure.
And if it's rattling your teeth and glasses for a day, you get through it. But if it's weeks and weeks of cough, it really is life-changing. So it's an interesting space. And really, when we were doing our IPF research, Mark Williams thought after the fact that perhaps we should also be looking at cough. And we did run an animal study with Ifenprodil. It was a guinea pig study, which sounds cliche, but rats don't have a cough reflex.
Interesting.
Guinea pigs do. And so they expose the lungs to a compound that makes the guinea pig cough, and then you deploy your compound and you can make comparisons. What's the cough count? How quickly do the coughs start? And we had very good results in that study, and that's why we added chronic cough to our IPF study.
And it can be quite debilitating. I mean, when we think about having a cough, most of us haven't had a chronic cough that goes on for days and weeks, and it can cause vomiting. And I can't even imagine what it's like for people who are living with a chronic cough, that they just can't get to the source and figure out what's going on and stop it. So if this works, I mean, good on Algernon. You mentioned Dr. Mark Williams. Let's talk about him. He's back on the board of directors. He was one of the co-founders of Algernon, right?
Well, yeah, he's the co-founder of the Algernon drug repurposing program.
Okay.
And in that, really, the Mark had identified the compounds that were, they had to fit in a special box. These were drugs that had never been approved in the US or Europe. They had to be off patent, and they had to have a relatively strong safety history. And when I say that, there are some drugs that are safe, but let's say a chemotherapy agent, you can only take it for 2 weeks because it's toxic to the heart. So it's safe, but in its very specific label, but generally safe compounds. And it was really his brainchild. And so he, as everyone knows, he left the company in March to move ahead with another business opportunity, but has now been able to rejoin as a director of the board. And I'm quite pleased that he's back. We have now that continuity on our research programs, and his insights and his experience with preclinical, clinical biochemistry. And he's a heck of a nice guy.
Well, that's good to hear. So Algernon's got a lot going on right now. You've got the chronic cough trial. You've got DMT stroke study going on.
Right.
You've got the small cell lung cancer study. Anything else that I'm missing?
Nothing that you're missing. I mean, we do have inventory, but I think I want to be a bit cautious about advancing too many, putting too much out on the buffet.
Got it.
Because,
any last words for your investors who are watching right now?
Just appreciate everyone continuing to follow the story, and more news to come.
Okay, AlgernonPharmaceuticals.com for more information. CEO Christopher Moreau, always good to talk to you. Thanks for the update.
Nice seeing you, Cyndi. Take care.
You too.